Dear Venerable Sisters and Dhamma friends, this is the time for our today's Dhamma talk. To start the Dhamma talk, you may all consent with 3 times sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse. Namo tasse bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhasse. Katanca bhikkhave atitam anvagameti evañ viññānaṁ ahosin atita maddhānanti tattha nanding samanvānīti. Katanca bhikkhave anāgataṁ patikankhati evañ viññāno siyang anāgata maddhānanti tattha nanding samanvānīti. Dear Dhamma friends, this is the fifth day and the 5th talk accordingly based upon this particular sutta known as Bhaddekaratta Sutta, and in which the Buddha taking the opportunity to explain the ideal type of solitude and how one should love or maximize that kind of ideal solitude and the freedom. And at the beginning, he gives the negative why one is not in solitude and not in freedom, not in a relaxation mood, because the mind is often tracking back the past or yearning for the future. So therefore it often loses the present moment. And how one track back the past is thinking how does one experienced materiality and feelings, perception and formations, mental and volitional formations, and consciousness in the past, or equally yearn for the future, how one has this kind of future planning regarding the materiality, the feeling, perception, volitional formation and the consciousness. That is how one becomes stressful. That is how one becomes away from the freedom and the solitude. So therefore, if someone wish to experience this solitude or the freedom, emancipation, one has to do away with these two. So, in order to do away with this tracking back the past and the yearn for the future, the alternative thesis, the positive thing is dwell upon the present moment. So, therefore, with respect to the materiality, with respect to the feelings, the perceptions and the mental formations and the consciousness, one must understand how to bring the mind to the present moment, where often it is free from this past and the future. So therefore, coming back to the middle path or the beginning of the solitude and the freedom happens. So even though one understand that and bring the mind to the present setup, that is not the ultimatum, because even in the present moment, when you are meditating or when you try to be mindful of vigilance, there are still some loopholes or pitfalls, something like some kind of attraction to the present moment materiality or feelings or perception or volitional formations or the consciousness. Or there may be some kind of irritation or unhappiness or kind of a hatred towards the present moment materiality or any kind of aggregates. So with respect To that, we have taken 4 days for the materiality, feelings, perception, and the volitional formations. And today we are going to take the last aspect of these 5 aggregates, namely the consciousness. So in the yesterday talk also, we found the term volitional formation. In Pali it is called sankhara, have many shades of meaning under different contexts, and therefore one has to, even in theoretical understanding, get and be acquainted with all these shades of meaning as much as possible, then easy to comprehend what is happening in this journey of mindfulness. Equally in the consciousness also, there are a lot of synonyms, sometimes called chitta, sometimes called it is mana, sometimes known as mano, and later commentators wish to understand it as the heart. So therefore different meanings are there. But vijnana is somewhat common terms even in Pali. So mana vijnana, mano vijnana, chitta, hadaya, these are the things you may come across in the Theravada texts. So in English it has been translated as the consciousness, but it has different degrees and different shades of meaning. So as far as the consciousness is concerned, whenever someone is not heard about, thought about, or practiced towards this solitude, towards this freedom, that mind is called the untrained mind, or the commoners untrained mind, and it is highly engaged and busy, sometimes tensed in this peripheral affair known as sensuous pleasure. In the Western psychology they call sexual pleasure, but in Buddhist they call sensual pleasure, or that means related with the faculties. The eye, ear, the nose, the tongue and the body. Sometimes the mind acts as a door or faculty as itself. So it is highly searching for and earning regarding the visual objects, sounds, smells, food, luxuries and philosophical pet ideas. So when they get engaged, the mind becomes fully engaged, very busy, not solitude and not in freedom, not in relaxation, and often what happens is get tensed. So therefore, as far as the consciousness is concerned, whenever it is engaged in this superficial way, outermost layer is very diversified, and it is veracity, and so much of options are there. So often it is not satisfied with whatever the option come across it, whatever the option given in the very present moment, and always think about a better one. So therefore not a single person, single commoner is happy in the present moment, and therefore they take it as a norm, because they know only this superficial consciousness. But they do not know even there are other equilibriums and other inward paths where you can experience the contentment, the satisfaction, saturation in this very life, because they are throughout experience in the single life or historical one, no one died happily, satisfied, contented. That is because they never explore into the other layers or other degrees of the consciousness. So whenever the religion or spiritual things comes, they suggest instead of this superficial, peripheral activity of sensuous pleasure, if you can go into the deep layer, there is a better chances for this contentment, for this freedom, for this solitude. And it appear like for the commoners or for the people in the superficial consciousness, it appear like something mystics. It appear like something not realistic. It appear like something not scientific, not rational. So therefore hardly they are ready to sacrifice the sensuous pleasure. With respect to this solitude, religious, spiritual path. Even if they understand it, if they are not skillful, hardly they can gain this kind of a satisfaction, kind of contentment. So therefore that also work against this exploration towards contentment. The Buddha, before his enlightenment, he had the inclination towards this spiritual gain or religious path, and there he found the faith, the energy, the concentration and the wisdom were already recognized, known paths. They recommended to go into this spiritual achievement. One of the great discoveries or the thing the Buddha came out is the mindfulness in addition to these four, in addition to the faith, in addition to the energy, in addition to the concentration and the wisdom. So when he fixed this mindfulness also into this, and he never refused the existing other four, the faith, the energy, concentration and the wisdom. So he organized them in such a way, and whenever you become faithful, you arouse kind of energy. If you are not faithful, you don't have this energy to take the spiritual path. Whenever the energy is mobilized, warmed up, that is a proximate cause for this mindfulness. And when the mindfulness come into being, it gives rise to this concentration, and the concentration leads to the wisdom as to understand the comparative or discriminative difference between the sensuous pleasure and the spiritual or the religious kind of consciousness. So, some or the other, up to the year 1000 to 1005, this message, the orderly manner, have been well preserved, and therefore there were some consistency among the meditators to go into this spiritual and religious achievement, and not only that, cutting through further into the ideal solitude, into the eternal peace, emancipation. But unlucky enough, for about 1000 years, there were a lot of disturbances, and ultimately the Buddhism also, the teaching of the Buddha also cut into two: the real teaching of the Buddha Dhamma, and the Buddhism, the ism part. Ism part still maintain, together with going with hand in hand with the other religions, or the faith, faith, energy, concentration of the wisdom, but mindfulness lost. So therefore the predictability, the credibility, the sureness of the path fairly got complicated, so that some may go, some may not, and even if you go too deep, there was kind of a trap and hold into this religious and spiritual middle way, so the halfway, without going into the very deep layers. That some monks or some meditators attribute to the lack of mindfulness or to the fact that mindfulness has not given the priority. Now again, due to the utter necessity of this human suffering, specifically with respect to the frustration and the tension or environmental pollution or the reductionist theory, someone has to find a universal kind of answer, even if it is applicable for a very little fraction of the population. The mindfulness now has taken up and kept in the proper proportion, and then those who take that the proper proportion, they find a path, and it is with less complications. And therefore, even though you are going to take this path from the sensuous pleasure to the spiritual or kind of a religious kind of achievement, the kind advice is, specifically you find in the Satipatthana Sutta, kind advice is to keep the mindfulness in forefront, so that the faith, the energy, the concentration and the wisdom has to be balanced accordingly, and the mindfulness will take care to balance specifically the energy aspect and the concentration aspect as far as two mental factors are concerned, and balancing the faith and the wisdom. Because whatever it may be in this couplet, if one is going to become too much, the path will be imbalanced, unaligned. To make the alignment, mindfulness must be in the forefront, as if you have 5 fingers, the middle finger, the longest one and the tallest one, and that is like mindfulness. And the 2 adjoining fingers are recognized as the energy and the concentration. They have to be balanced, and the thumb and the small finger recognized as, in this epithet, the faith and the wisdom. The mindfulness has to overlook them, then only this spiritual path go without much of a complication. So therefore, as we discussed, how to deal with this materiality, how to deal with these feelings, perception and volitional formations, all the time the surveillance, the vigilance, the presence of the mind, be here and now, must be very alert. Then only one can understand the imbalanced states. Whenever this imbalance happens, even though you are in the middle path, some kind of a craving or some kind of a hatred arises. When and where arises, you have to be very alert and understand how to make the balance, and then only unhindered development going to happen. So when it is happening, the monitoring, the observation is very, very, must be very vigilant. So with respect to the mindfulness, the beginners have kind of a interrupting kind of mindfulness at a time, yes, at a time it is not. So this is how the beginner starts. And when and where it becomes steadfast or it becomes sati indriya, you know how to make use this as a army or like a team in order to rectify this kind of imbalances or the arising of a desire or arising of the hateful situation, and the other mindfulness is becoming a leading, it can run a leading role together with the other forces, and they are slowly the meditator become a little bit independent from the external things and know how to take the thing into the balance situation. So they are become somewhat free, somewhat isolated, and become qualified to be isolated and practice silence retreat and support your spiritual journey without much of a imbalance or the aligned situation. When the mindfulness become sati bala, the power of mindfulness, consciousness has to be mature enough, or consciousness has to be flexible enough, or equanimous enough to be undisturbed even if you are not mindful. This is a kind of a challenge to the consciousness. Because from the sensuous pleasure, or the worldly sensuous pleasure-seeking mind, to the spiritual path, you have to use the faith, energy, mindfulness, wisdom, the concentration and the wisdom. So they are doing different parts, roles, and the mindfulness is controlling them and impartially monitoring them. And at a time, you to have the proper balance, even if with the spiritual gains, you must be impartial, you must be equanimous towards the mindfulness. So that is the point. Your mindfulness, together with consciousness, going to recognize unmindfulness. When you are in the, for example, in sitting meditation, you try your best, align sharply on the primary object. For example, we'll take the in-breath and out-breath. When the in-breath and out-breath is consistent and face-to-face with the noting mind, you will be happy. You can report, earlier I can take, so to say, 3 minutes continuously, and you can make a determination to go to 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, consistently with the in-breath and out-breath. In the walking, 3-4 paces you can do mindfully. And if you make sure after pacing up and down 3 times, minds water off. Or sometimes seeing happen, hearing happen, that kind of thing happen. But if you are undisturbed, if you recognize for up and down 3 phases, I am mindful, then it is not mindful. And if you understand this unmindfulness, and it's still if you are not disturbed or worrying, you can make a determination or special fine adjustments to increase it up to 4 with preparedness. And then when it becomes 4, you develop kind of a determination power, and the mind power gain kind of a confidence, and you can slowly increasing it. When that is happening, our rational mind or deductive mind hardly recognize the value of not to worry, even if you are unmindful. Even when you are meditating, if the sounds come and disturb you, or thoughts come and disturb you, pains come and disturb you, main thing is not to worry. Under such circumstances, you know this is the path. Path means to keep the track with the primary object. In sitting, in breath and out breath. In the walking, the left leg, left step, right step, left step, right step. In the day-to-day activities, whatever may be, the activity you do intentionally, that is what you keep the attention. When it is happening, the wandering mind happens. Wonders of daydreaming, fantasizing happen, or pains and sounds and come and disturb. When that happens, whenever the mind is ready to assume the status and power of mindfulness, the consciousness and the mindfulness come together and understand up to that point, mindfulness was intact. Beyond that, broken. Due to a sign, due to a thought, due to a pain, or kind of thing. So when that happens, untrained mind often regret. Even if I come to a meditation hall, even if I take a chance and organize and everything. When he come here, a sound happens, or kind of a pain happens, or thinking happens, or what an unfortunate being am I. So if it is not well taken, attribute to the other person who made the sound. Or if you have any pain, you curse it. If the thought happens, you assume it as your own thoughts. Then what happens is, you have no chances to recover or restore the mindfulness, but your worrying mind, that is hateful mind, continue to start. But there's another chance to see, after a certain amount of wandering off, after some amount of this worrying, after a certain amount of this rationalization, mind come back due to your past experience, trial and error, and your intention, mind come back sometimes on the primary object. In sitting, maybe in the in-breath and out-breath, or in the walking steps. When it is coming back, you have a chance, if you are really rationalized, to be happy, because now the mind come back by its own initiative. If clearly you can to analyze, it is not merely by an intention, not merely by your will. So therefore, going out is, of course, to be rationalized as something discouraging and something disheartening. But when it is coming back, that indicates mind has some its own tendency. After a while it come back. So when and where it comes back, without punishing it, without making an inquiry, without have a post-mortem, if you are open enough, if you are free enough to continue with that, you find that the mind and the consciousness and the mindfulness is working in such a way, you can easily erase off the mistake or the mishap, so-called the wandering mind and daydreaming or discouragement kind of thing. You can come back and continue with the mindfulness. So this is the part often yogis are not much appreciating. They are masters to regret, discourage and complain that my mind wanders off due to this and that and kind of thing, and it appear like a permanent mistake or permanent damage. But they fail to understand, whenever it go back, sometimes with your initiative and often without your initiative, it comes back. Whenever it comes back, if you are not a kind of a doubtful person, if you are not a kind of a worrying kind of person, there's a better chance to make use this opportunity and continue with the mindfulness. So this is the the point where, when and where you are ready to accept the returning mindfulness to the object and continue, and if you are not entertaining any worries, that is the point it calls the power of mindfulness. Mindfulness has come up to a powerful state. So your consciousness unshaken whether you are mindful or not. This is a kind of a special state of mindset. Earlier you had a very rational, direct, linear kind of evaluation. You expect mindfulness to be continuous, steadfast, and that is not possible. Instead you have to compromise. It may come and go. So how can you develop kind of a suchness, not to worry, even it is unmindful, and not to get so much of elated, even it naturally come back to the mindfulness. This is the state where the consciousness is rather come back and get a distance from the faculties and the sensuous impingements, is highly engaged in these the internal faculties like the faith, energy, mindfulness, consciousness and the wisdom. Even though I try to explain with respect to this mindfulness, it is true with respect to the faith, with respect to the energy, with respect to the concentration, with respect to wisdom. But it is, I don't know, somewhat easy to explain in the mindfulness, and in the same token, you can see at a time you are very faithful, mind is so energetic, you feel like meditating overnight. No much necessity of the walking meditation, and you can feel like. And at a time you are so discouraged, like a flat tire, no go. Because you are so disheartened, sometimes feel like get up and go, sometimes go home. And whenever the faith becomes the power of faith, your consciousness is supporting in such a way, you understand these things are cause-and-effect relationships. You have to be equally observant when the mind is with full faith and it is not with much faith, it is doubting. Both of them are mental states. Both of them are called mental factors. So consciousness must be in such a state to accept them both in an equal way. That's a very, very kind of a religious, spiritual state you never entertain in the sensuous world. In the sensuous world, you are very reactive. You are very vehement, reacting, and therefore you consider as your duty to have this kind of pleasurable moods and the painful states, and otherwise you don't feel like you are a social being. But when you come to meditation, not at the beginning, after a while, you have to understand, even if you are in a very good meditation, thoughts, sound, pain can happen. And some may caused by others, some may be due to natural causes. And accordingly, the faith may come and go. Sometimes you feel very energetic, very bright, but sometimes you don't know, you are slack, fallen into sleep and start snoring. Both of them, if you are going to consider as me or mine or myself, ultimately what happens, the consciousness becomes very immature and very reactive, very choosy and rushing to quick decisions. Instead, you have to develop the consciousness, have to have a equally suspended attention, whether it is fully energetic or very with the sloth and torpor, the slimy mind. And not to arrive at a decision, I am a slow, I am the energetic kind of a character, I am a lazy bones with sloth and torpor. This misunderstanding or quick decisions are the symptoms of undeveloped consciousness or undeveloped mindfulness also you can say, undeveloped equanimity also you can say. The mindfulness also the same, you have to consider equal way. And when you go to the concentration, it is the most sensitive thing. It is the most immediate thing for the meditators, because they often measure their progress with respect to concentration. And if you take the question and answer session, so much of questions or complaints, not that they are not mindful. Even though they are mindful, if the consciousness fluctuates, accordingly they are conscious. When the concentration fluctuates, accordingly the consciousness becomes agitated. The consciousness also something impermanent. Whenever the causative factors are aligned, it comes. Whenever they are distorted, it disappears. Your consciousness must be to understand consciousness is the source. These are the mental factors. So to say, if the consciousness is like the ocean, these faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration and the wisdoms are just like waves. They are going up and down. That is the nature. At the beginning you are appreciating full faith, full of energetic, bright mind or the energized mind, warmed up mind, and the full mindfulness and the full concentration and the wisdom. But one day you have to come down to the ground level, earth, to see this concentration itself is subject to changes. And even the very wisdom. Even it is coming and going, if you are to maintain this balanced mind, that is what they call the preparing your mind for the ideal solitude. Preparing your mind for the best of the freedom and the vastness, the wideness. And when you go up to that level, the consciousness has to get a distance from the faculties, the organs and their respective impingements, and it is really in the middle. The consciousness has come from the peripheral level to the somewhat centralized. So there, when and where you are to understand, now I am with faith and I am not. Now I am with energy and now I am not. Now I am with mindfulness and then I am not. And now I am with concentration and then it can be without or dispersed mind, scattered mind, or the wisdom, or maybe ignorance. For both, if the consciousness can develop into a kind of a equanimous, equipoised approach, that we can say development of these faculties, in this context, the faith, energy, concentration, mindfulness, concentration and the wisdom as faculties, you are developing viveka nissitang, viraga nissitang, nirodha nissitang, patinissagana passi. There's kind of their fluctuation, you are looking at a distance, never reacted immediately. So therefore, once they become powers, faith as a power, energy as a power, mindfulness as a power, concentration as the power, and wisdom as the power, you have to train them, you have to reinforce them, you have to galvanize them. Viveka nissitang, viraga nissitang, nirodha nissitang, patinissagana. We have to do it in a leisurely manner. If it is coming, if it is developing, well and good. If it is not developing, your mindfulness and the consciousness is ready to understand, unshaken way. So when that happens, definitely you must have distractions. Definitely you have disturbances. And under such circumstances, disturbances are your teacher. Trial and error is the method. So once the meditation comes up to that level, you can't predict. These things are fluctuating due to the cause and effect relationship and the external uncontrollable variables. When it happens, you must understand how to maintain this consciousness in an equipoised manner, in a equilibrium. And this is called, at the face of the 8 vicissitudes, mind must be unshaken. This is what we call the immunity. This is what you call the resistance power. And that is the one ultimately give the background or the backbone for your spiritual life. Up to that level, you have to have the ideal situation and the best conducive conditions bring up to this level. But there the consciousness has to be ready, be equanimous to see them as such. Even these faculties of 7 factors of enlightenment, they come and go, but the mind must mature enough and see the fluctuation, but not moved by, not reacting, not choosy. So therefore in the Bojjhangas, or the 7 factors of enlightenment, the last one is the equanimity. And once that develops, you have to reinforce it, galvanize it with Viveka Nisitang, Viraga Nisitang, Nirodha Nisitang, Patisaganupassini. Viveka Nisitang means that you are doing it in a very relaxed way. Viraga Nisitang, you have no special attachment for, even for the faith, even for the energy, even for the mindfulness, even for the concentration, even for the wisdom. Because if you are going to attach, whenever they are subjected to changes, you are the one to suffer. You never, when you are going to attach, that you never ready to accept them as the mental factors. You try to consider them as me, mine and myself. So therefore, that kind of a relinquishment indicates the final goal, how the Nibbana is, how the emancipation is, how the ideal solitude is. So therefore, when that happens, it is that mind is appear like very irrational. Because the rational mind is reactive. Rational mind is choosy. Rational mind is duality. Rational mind always make duality, split and rule method. So the Buddha, using the mind itself to bring up to the middle level as a training. Not now we are talking about the defilements. Of course, defilements are something to be decided and it's gone now. But we are talking about the positive, good mental factors like faith, energy, kind of thing. And even then when they are changing, if you are not developed it, if you are not prepared, if you do not have this mindset, still that lack of your knowledge, lack of your preparedness, always going to make mind shaky. The consciousness becomes very shaky. So that reinforcement, that immunity, some or the other, you have to practice. And that is not at the beginning of your sitting. Of course, at the beginning of the sitting, you have to develop them as a beginner. Once it comes up to a certain level, when the different faculties, and in this context, the faith, mindfulness, the energy, mindfulness, the concentration and the wisdom, going to take their own roles, you have to step back and see, you run it. Of course, sometimes you fail, sometimes you become success. But to both, if the mind, the consciousness is developing this equanimity, the duality get lost. So therefore, the mind play very, very tricky, perverted games due to its inherited, the perverted natures, in unhonest kind of situation. So you have to not let the consciousness to take you for a ride and develop the resistance, the equanimity, the immunity to look at it but not to be shaken. And that training hardly you can do, or I would say you can do best in your day-to-day activities. And when that happens, even the non-meditator can observe it. So therefore, you develop, that is in the under laboratory situation in the meditation center, cross-legged and closed eyes and the silent place. And once you develop these necessary faculties, in the walking meditation you are putting into practice. And with bit of sounds and little bit of pains and little bit of thoughts, you develop mindfulness as well as unmindful mind, just be aware of. And when you go to the day-to-day activities, you can see patches or the chunk of time where you are not mindful. So whenever it happens, if you are uninstructed, if you are unprepared, if you do not know the ideal solitude, if you do not know the freedom, often that becomes a reason to be sad. But the ideal lover of solitude make it a reason to be glad even under such circumstances. This message you never find in other religions. This message you don't find even in samatha meditation. This is only available in the vipassana meditation. This is called tadi. Tadi means the suchness, maintaining the quality, maintaining the unshakable quality, and irremovable qualities, immovable qualities, to see the good and the bad equally, loss and the gain equally, fame and the ill fame equally, and that is the point that mind no more can play the duality. You are ready to accept anything. And once that happens, the mind loses, the consciousness loses its base. So far it was very, in a concrete manner, prepared. So therefore, there onward, the mind has to find its own base, because it is weaned out. It's a weakened and no much of food. So therefore, under such circumstances, the Buddha recommend only the underlying tendencies of your behavioral or personality traits are the only thing mind can make use it. Because you are rather restrained, be prepared, and to deal with them. But under such circumstances, unknown traits, unknown kind of tendencies going to arise. And you find no relationship related to the background. So when it happens, instead of worrying, you have to understand this is the way. Whenever there is no other food, the mind is going to take these undermining tendencies, personality traits, and as and when they manifest, one thing you have to remember, this undermining tendency, as and when manifest, they become weak. More and more get exposed, they become weak. For example, if you light a candle, more and more light continues, the candle burns. So, not to worry, because other factors now fairly under control, let that happen. When that happens, you must observe them with rather without judgmental, non-judgmental way. So that then onward, the meditation is not a big energetic regimentation. It is a very kind or very subtle, rather observation and very aesthetic to see. More you get distance from the phenomena and observe in a very vigilant way, this is not me, this is not mine, this is not myself, like, you find it is such an effective tool, work under such circumstances. But you will be dumbbound, very difficult to tell others, because the world is so reactive. It is always taken as a human right to react. But now, due to your gradual process and with preparedness and theoretical understanding, you come to understand it, the equality of the two extremes. So what happens is, when that kind of training happens, the fluctuation or ups and downs will be less and less and less. Ultimately, mind rests rather at the datum line without much of leading to the two extremes. So that is coming to the equipoiseness or equanimity, or we can say the solitude, or we can say it is the freedom, no much of fluctuation. Then you can measure, size up your amount of ignorance. In the worldly life, what are you doing? Thinking it is your benefit or your well-being, and your real well-being or your real solitude or your real freedom is completely maybe different. So therefore, you of course understand the magnanimity, the enormity of your ignorance, but you are understanding that with a hilarious feeling. Because it has been nullified now, it has been, its venomous power has reduced, so you find very difficult to communicate with the commoners. That may be the very reason the Buddha, soon after his enlightenment, he decided not to preach. Because people are really behind the reaction and these quick decisions and maximize pleasure principle, maximize the pleasure. So if someone asks to slow down, even that will not be accepted. That message itself is irritating. But you have to now understand how much you have to restrain, how much you have to withdraw from that and go in there and slow down the situation to see. For example, if you wish to see a generator, when it is running, if you're going to tackle, you will get a shock. It is dangerous. Because it is running at 1,500 rounds per minute. So, and the power at one side, and the mechanical power at one side, and the electric power at the other side. So if you wish to understand the machine, you have to stop the machine and remove the hull and see how the cams are working and how the cogwheels are running, how all the other mechanisms are working. So when you are fast moving, very difficult to understand it. But the thing is, in our machine, if you are going to stop it, finished, had it. So only thing is you have to calm down. Calm down to the maximum, that means not up to the 100%, but to a certain extent that your deductive knowledge, your rational mind feel enough. That does not mean that you are 100% studying everything, but slowly when it is the understanding the ignorance increases, not you have to understand the totality of your ignorance. If you understand the just mechanism, and you will see that is what happened in the all over the world, across the time and across the space, across the whole humanity. So there you are understanding not your own mind, you see the human mind, that is how it works. And how you made so much of defilements, how you made so much of frustration and tension, environmental pollution, mind pollution, because the rat race, one-upmanship, chasing behind others or running in front of them. So that is the way. But the Buddha, at the beginning of the meditation, there is some characteristics of that. But slowly when you come to the middle of the consciousness, ultimately from that junction, you will still see the heart core, the center of it. Not necessarily you have to go to the center. By coming from the peripheral level to up level, that level, you fairly understand how the entanglement happen and how the disentanglement happen. So therefore the Buddha says, the understanding of or sizing up of your ignorance is the wisdom. So therefore there's a huge, very proximate relationship between the ignorance and the wisdom. But so far, we thought wisdom means something outside, knowing about this and that. But now it is becoming so reciprocal. More and more you to understand your ignorance, more and more you call wisdom. So therefore, the relationship is explained just like a bubble of water or drop of water on the leaf of a lotus flower or leaf of a lotus. Even though it is one working upon the other, they are not smearing each other. There's no kind of a touch. So therefore the Buddha says, Pabassaramidam bhikkhave chittang. O monks, the mind itself is lustrous, is very pure. But its outer layer is with so much of the rust and the grease and the dirt. So the commoner, he only sees the external rust or external crust or external grease or soil. So therefore he never thinks that is something purifiable. Therefore he says for a commoner there is no meditation, no concentration. But instead the instructed, prepared yogi, he knows mind is as such. It is so pure, it is so lustrous, but very, very thin layer, that is called sensuous pleasure. It is the right round you have. It is very diversified, it is very bright, and it is very cocktail party. But if you can penetrate it, you know, irrespective of whether you are male or female, irrespective of you are a monk or ordained or not, irrespective of you are born Buddhist or not, that is the human mind. And its majority is very pure, only the outer layer. And if you can see through it, the Buddha says for such a person, this meditation is successful because he has a positive thinking. For other people, those who have no positive thinking, ever entertain doubts. For such a person, whenever the faith disappears, they become completely disheartened. Whenever the energy lost, they become completely disheartened. Whenever the mindfulness is no more, they think it's a permanent damage. And then when the concentration is scattered off, they become disheartened. And the wisdom is no more, disheartened. They never believe it's a temporary thing happened due to the cause and effect relationship. So therefore they have no the freedom of the mind, no freedom, no solitude. They are ever entertain doubts. So therefore tackling this mind and going penetrate into the crux is at the beginning appear like a science, very methodical. You have to understand individual characteristics and go to the middle and then go to the materiality, and then you have to go understand somewhat the feelings and remove the extremes and get the no pain, no pleasure and go there. And ultimately you have to go to a signless situation so that perception has no saying. And then you have to go to a deep and no intention, no volition, no will. And then only you can see the mechanism of the mind itself, because these are mental factors. The mind is known as the real, the core issue. So in order to give an example, it says in organizations like mafia, there's a pattern of the administrative patterns. The opinion giver, the main man, never exposed even to the board of directors. And the board of directors never exposed by their identity to the other the executives and from their supervisors and then the daily paid laborers or sometimes mercenaries and hired the criminals. So whenever the police is going to tackle it, being it is a moral cancer in the society, whatever the police activity can tackle only the hired people or mercenaries or hired criminals. They don't know. They can't think about who is the main person. So by killing them or by doing away with them, you can't weaken the main organization. Only what you can do is use them as clue. With their support, you have to understand what is the immediate person who issue orders, and that particular person, then you have to go to the inner layer, and then only you have to go and tackle the main person. And once that is revealed, if it is present to the court, even though the main man never done any criminal, he is the main culprit. Because he is the one give the main opinion. Therefore, as the punishments are concerned, he has to take the lion's share. Exactly the way, unless otherwise you tackle this materiality, and then go to the feelings and perception and the volitional, these three are individualistic. Some people have feelings, some have perception, and some have the volition. But inside only you can tackle the mind, the consciousness. But by tackling or by handling this materiality and other mental factors, the consciousness becomes weaker and weaker and weaker. When it becomes very weaker, it is very venomous. It becomes very perverted. And it do any kind of thing. So therefore, you have to understand, by weakening them, and exposure itself is enough for this organization to break, because the main culprit may be the police superintendent. They are the people running this kind of big, dirty organization. So just mere exposure enough. Exactly the way when you are dealing to the consciousness, before the Buddha, they were so sharp. They were to believe the materiality is not the soul. It is like outer court. They told inside there's a sheet known as these feelings, and within that there's a sheet known as perception, and within that there's a sheet known as volition, and that's all you can do. The consciousness part is beyond humanity. It is up to the omnipresent God or the Brahma. You can't tackle. Because it is working in such a perverted way. It is in such a unreliable way. But the Buddha, he says, by weakening these four, which is possible, definitely going to weaken the main culprit. And just mere exposure, how the peripheral mind or superficial mind is going for vehemently on this, the sensuous pleasure. And instead there are some other equilibrium level, when it come to the middle, come to the primordial form, come to the crux. And slowly when you are going there, you have to have moral training, concentration training, and the wisdom training. At the wisdom training level, you see the network in the three-dimensional way. It is very difficult to understand in the linear method, because in the only linear method you can see different strands of connections. But when everything coming into the understanding in the 3D, you see it is what a wonderful way it is working. And so far, till that you see the mechanism, you yourself or your personality, your likings and disliking, your traits, everything was fertilizer, nutriments for the system to run. Whenever you step back and observe it, you can see slowly you can wean them off and ultimately see it, and then only you can use them, if at all, in a beneficial way for your well-being. On their onward they become tamed and you have become the master. Unless you go and tap this main culprit, you are the slave, they are the masters. So therefore, more and more you go to the deeper layers, there is no much of regimentation. It's a matter of understanding or see things as they are, or just mere by exposure. They become so weak. And you develop your spiritual determination power and the will. We can't say it's a willpower, but kind of the hilarious understanding. It is rather related with your equanimity. How much you are equanimous, how much you are equipoised, how much you are unshaken, how much you are immovable and to see things. And therefore, this is the Buddha is the only one prescribed. This is a possible thing in this very life. No second person involved. So you have to understand in the theoretical way, and a possible way. You have to rationalize it and practice slowly. Only the most important part is understanding the mindfulness and unmindfulness as equal way. That in the Patisambhidhamagga, the book of discrimination, Venerable Sariputta says, Apamade na kampatiti satibalam. Pamada means negligence. Even the negligence happens. That means lack of diligence or unmindfulness. Na kampatiti, unshaken, that is what the power of mindfulness. I am very happy about that the book, The Power of Mindfulness by Venerable Nyanaponika. It's a very good one. But this quotation is not there. Had that also gone into that, it would have been still reinforced, because otherwise everyone take mindfulness as the ultimatum. Mindfulness as the end result. No, mindfulness also a tool, just like the wisdom, just like the concentration, just like the energy and the faith. So those who have incomplete understanding, incomplete theoretical knowledge, they are so worrying whenever the faith disappears, whenever the energy disappears, whenever the mindfulness disappears, concentration of wisdom, thinking it's a permanent damage. It is never a permanent damage. You have to be very conscious about both. And Tadi is the quality the Buddha prescribed, specifically with this ideal solitude is concerned. He says, alattang yadidang sadhu, nalattang kusalamiti. He says, when someone is going on a pindapata, the arms rounds, if something come and offered, good. If it did not happen, no one offered, still good. What to do? Because it is something has to give. So he says, it is just like ubayene eva so tadi rukkanga patinivattati. The example given is, you go to a tree expecting there are some fruits. So when you go there, if there are fruits, of course it is good. But if it is not available, you have to accept it. That's it. That's the tree. That is the way. So one person got one episode. One day the Jesus Christ and the team is going there, and he go to a fig tree, and when you go there, there are no figs. And he cursed the tree, so it fallen all the leaves and dried off. But the Buddha says, if there is no fig tree, still good. That is the Tadi. So therefore, if you are claiming that I am such a person, I must have, that is the point where the frustration, where the disheartening, everything happen. If you are really expecting this is to be as a cause and effect relationship, it's what a nice way. I mean, if there is no food, fasting is very good for your stomach. It's a treatment. Once in a way, you do away with that. But very difficult in a residential retreats. Because people come and pouring this and that, ultimately we are daily going to have these square meals. But when you are in a solitude, that's the way you have to develop. And the politician will not be happy with that. The economists, the insurance people, the media, the socialists, the people those are doing the social work, they will not be happy. They say that we have to have everything very assured and complete. But this is not the world. World is such an uncertain thing. So therefore this Tadi, its character is known as suchness. And that is exactly explained in the Taoism. You let the things to happen, it's in own accord. Whatever you are going to adjust it, whatever the editing you are going to do it never go without the consequences. So therefore, if it is impossible, you may do, but make sure you do the least possible damage. That is to call the first do no harm. Or sabba papasa karna. So when you're happening it, that is what you call, therefore that there's no much of regimentation, there's no much of frustration at that moment also. And when the results happens also, you have the solitude, you have the freedom, you have the open mind, and that is the broadness, that is the tolerance, that is the immunity that you are going to develop. And without the proper training, without proper preparedness, without proper information, you will never take this as a combination, a positive, middle path, and the climax of the situation. So that is why in the different ways the Buddha presented, and to you to digest it, and rationalize it, and then practice whenever possible, but don't think that you can do it for all the events in the whole day, in the sitting, walking and day-to-day activities. But when and where you do it, it has immediate effect. That is called akalika. As soon it happens, you are bound to get results. It won't take any maturing time. So therefore, more and more you practice, it become impromptu. Improvised, very electric. And the first few incidents are very enlightening. Because you feel the Dhamma in an enlightening manner. But later it becomes your second nature. You become very mature, very patient, very equanimous. And that is what the solitude means. That is what the freedom means. So it is inherited nature. We had it, but we never implemented it due to our arrogance, due to our conceit, due to our desire, due to our egoistic ideas. So don't fight with them. Slowly, let them weaken and have an idea to develop this equilibrium as much as possible. When that happens, you will see there's no necessity of this duality and the consciousness to come and make big judgments. The judgmental mind is the thing we can understand how the consciousness is working. So therefore, evenly suspended attention and suspended decision may be the rule of thumb. So with that remark, I would like to sum up the today's talk. Thank you very much for listening.